Academy Award-winning actor Ernest Borgnine wasn't just known for his iconic roles. He was also famously candid. In a rare and revealing interview,
Often referred to as Hollywood's happiest actor, it is surprising that he had some people with whom he wasn't on good terms. Was it a typical hate story, or born from attitudinal defects? Join me as we delve into 5 firebrand Hollywood actors Ernest Borgnine reportedly hated in the industry. Anthony Quinn, the clash of two powerhouses. Born as Manuel Antonio Rodolfo Quinn, Oaxaca in Chihuahua, Mexico, on the 21st of April, 1915, and raised in Los Angeles, his success in Hollywood broke barriers for Latino actors in American cinemas. With rugged looks, a booming voice, and a commanding screen presence, he carved out a career as both a hero and a brute, and won 2 Academy Awards, namely Viva Zapata and Lust for Life. By the 1960s, he had established himself as a global star with leading roles in La Strada, Zorba the Greek, and The Guns of Navarone. The movie, which brought Quinn and Borgnine together, was an epic religious movie titled Barabbas in 1961, and it was their first time together on screen. The movie was filmed in Rome, and the production was massive and chaotic. It was shot under a mixed American-Italian crew, and Quinn played the central role of Barabbas. His character was to depict the thief who was released instead of Jesus, as the movie was biblical in its tone. For Borgnine, his role was that of Lucius, a Roman centurion and an antagonist. Their roles in the film perfectly describe their relationship off-screen as on-screen, and their antagonistic roles are depicted. However, the difference in their hate relationship was that it was documented. In Borgnine's autobiography, Ernie, their discord is planted when they have a blocking disagreement during a pivotal fight scene. For him, Anthony was an attention seeker, a trait Borgnine disliked. In his words, Tony wanted the camera to stay on him. Every angle, every swing, every grunt, Borgnine wrote, even when he wasn't throwing a punch. However, Borgnine wanted the scene to focus on action and storytelling, not vanity. He felt that although the movie was centered around Barabbas, it should also capture other scenes and events that occurred to him, not just to him. He continued, I told him, Tony, it's a fight, not a ballet. You're not Zorba here. This comment was said to elicit a furious reaction from Anthony Quinn, who was naturally known to bristle at anyone questioning his artistic instincts. Other crew members later recounted how they argued over little affairs after that, with Quinn demanding more takeover of places or scenes where he felt overshadowed. Borgnine performed all his stunts, fell, and punched himself, while Quinn, who was always concerned with the spotlight and screen presence, demanded retakes so that those scenes could look more mythical. The director, Richard Fleischer, later said in interviews, every scene was a negotiation. Ernie wanted to move, Tony wanted to pose. Although their altercation was not physical, they refused to rehearse together from the second week of production until the end of the movie shoot. The tension worsened during a climactic crucifixion sequence, where Borgnine's character was to lead Barabbas through the arena. It is best described in a recollection of one assistant director in a memoir titled The Sands in 1986, where he stated, Tony refused to wear dust or grime unless Ernie wore the same. Ernie laughed and said, I'm not the one trying to be a martyr. Tony stormed off the set. Later on, when production finally resumed, the coldness between the two persisted, and they completed the filming of Barabbas without ever dining together or speaking socially, a rare occurrence in the large casts of the 1960s. By the time the movie was released, it had attracted many positive and negative reviews, with critics praising Quinn's brooding presence and Borgnine's ruthless realism. However, any talk of them working together again on a movie was met with a resounding no from the outset. Borgnine also clarified that he wouldn't work with Quinn until he dropped the crown and picked up the script. Although Quinn never responded publicly, later interviews suggest that he viewed Borgnine as the last actor who lacked emotional imagination. In a 1975 Variety profile, he stated, there are actors who inhabit a man's soul, and some play the part. I've done both, but only one makes art. Even though no names were mentioned, it was clear who he intended it for. Even though they respected each other's power, they hated each other's methods. Charlton Heston, the overzealous actor. It seems that Borgnine had different opinions from those of the general public. To him, an opinion he aired in a 1980s behind-the-scenes interview, Heston was carved out of marble, a statue pretending to bleed. However, Heston was a young man with a square jaw, regal voice, and commanding presence. His looks efficiently represented the heroic masculinity of mid-century American cinema, and have featured in movies such as The Ten Commandments in 1956, Judah Ben-Hur in 1959, and so many others. He loved monologues and morals absolved to crew members. He was a cinematic gold. Even though Borgnine and Heston did not share screen time in Ben-Hur, their rivalry began from here, as Borgnine had auditioned for a role of either the Roman officer or a supporting role, but was passed over due to alleged concerns that his appearance, which was earthy and rugged, would clash with Charlton Heston's grandeur. In Ernie, Borgnine wrote, "They didn't want someone who could steal a scene. They wanted a guy to stand there and let Chuck look noble." This dismissal on the grounds of his looks hurt and sparkles a deep resentment, not because he envied Heston's roles, but because he believed his performances were detached from human emotion. Their political differences were another bone of contention, as Heston became an outspoken conservative activist and eventually president of the NRA and speaker at Republican national conventions. Borgnine was against him because he felt Heston was an extremist. He was a conservative who supported unions, was a veteran, and disliked actors using their status for moral posturing. In an archived interview with Variety in 1999, he commented on Heston's political persona by saying, "I love this country too, but I don't need to hold a musket whenever I say it." At the time, however, he mentioned no names. However, the interview was shortly after Heston's speech at the National Rifle Association. However, they both eventually worked together, and it was explosive. Everyone knew it was inevitable as they were two towering names of Hollywood at the time, and that moment in 1965 just presented the right opportunity. The movie was The Greatest Story Ever Told, where Heston played John the Baptist and Borgnine played the biblical centurion, a Roman soldier present at Christ's crucifixion. While their characters did not directly clash, their off-camera personalities did. The director, George Stevens, recalled in a production journal, "Chuck stayed in character all day, quoting scripture and fasting. Ernie showed up with a salami sandwich and cracked jokes with the crew. The contrast was sharp. As for Borgnine, he felt that Heston just took things too seriously. And in a TV retrospective, he shared that Heston was serious, but acting was no missionary calling. He recounted, "He wouldn't eat, I wouldn't talk. He just wandered around like he was John the Baptist. I said, 'Chuck, they already crucified the guy. You can take a break.'" However, despite Heston's image of being a prolific diary keeper, Borgnine never turned up in his script. It is safe to say that while others were antagonized for being too relaxed and not knowing the nitty-gritty of acting, his dislike stemmed from Heston's overzealousness. Montgomery Clift. When considering what makes anyone remarkable, the first thing that comes to mind is their ability to do what everyone else does differently. That could be said of Montgomery, considered one of Hollywood's most brilliant young stars in the 1940s. He brought something entirely new to the screen and helped usher in method acting alongside other actors like Marlon Brando and James Dean. Montgomery was raised in privilege, and he studied theater. He was also a part of the New York intelligentsia, which used acting techniques developed at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, where internal emotion was prioritized over external emotion. However, not everyone agrees with Montgomery's approach to acting, especially not one who uses rigorous methodology like Borgnine. For Borgnine, he believed in showing up on time, memorizing and knowing his lines, serving his story, the whole 9 yards of acting, which to him was a craft and not a therapy session. This was where he differed from Clift. For Clift, he believed in immersing himself in his lines emotionally and psychologically. He drew his ability to act from trauma, memory, and vulnerability. In the 1953 From Here to Eternity, Clift played Private Robert E. Lee Prewitt, a troubled yet principled soldier. In contrast, Borgnine played Sergeant Fatso Judson, the man who antagonizes Clift's friend, Maggio. Although both their scenes were limited, they shared enough set time for Borgnine to form an unkind opinion of Montgomery. Borgnine recalled in a mid-1980s interview, "He was always off in a corner, brooding. You'd say good morning, and he'd look right through you. I thought he was rude. Later, I realized he was just in another world." Montgomery's life took a new turn by the mid-1950s after a horrific car accident in 1956, in which his face got disfigured and his career suffered horribly. His relief was oftentimes alcohol and painkillers, and directors avoided him due to instability and delays. As for Borgnine, he was thriving and transitioned effortlessly between war movies, Western movies, and comedy. This turn of events only strengthened Borgnine's conviction about Clift, and in a 1974 interview he admits that it was hard to watch Monty fall apart. He was once great. He further says, "But he couldn't handle this business. You've got to be tough. It chews you up if you're not." Listening to this comment, one would understand that while he was compassionate, he was also judgmental. This incident only reaffirmed his belief that Montgomery was brilliant but fragile. He admired actors like Spencer Tracy and Charles Laughton, who were more powerhouses and came up with all forms of precision, not weakness and pain. Despite their shared credit in From Here to Eternity, Borgnine and Clift were never reunited in a movie or a function. Borgnine also never attended retrospectives of Montgomery's work, nor spoke of him until after his early death in 1966. Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis, who was born as Bernard Schwartz on the 3rd of June, 1925 in Brooklyn, began his movie career in his late 1940s with his dazzling looks that could make him pass as an idol. His Bronx accent and youthful energy, he became one of the Universal Pictures' hottest stars by mid-1950s. His several movie successes, such as Sweet Smell of Success, Spartacus, and Some Like It Hot, dispelled rumors of him climbing the movie ladder with just his face. He had proven his worth as an actor. His talent was legit, and he was here to stay. However, Borgnine had a different perspective. To him, Tony was nothing but a studio product. He was all Polish, no pain. Even though both men had something in common, as they were both children of working-class immigrant families and were both Navy veterans, they were two different individuals when it came to Hollywood. For Borgnine, he believed one earned a place in Hollywood only after years of stage acting and playing minor roles, an ideology that Curtis's rise to stardom never subscribed to. He rose to fame quickly and played many charming lead roles, but rarely got his hands dirty. Perhaps this was the first crack in their relationship, as it is safe to say that Borgnine believed in going down the long, challenging route, while for Curtis, life handed it to him easily. The first significant interaction between Curtis and Borgnine wasn't till 1958 on the set of The Vikings, a big-budget Technicolor epic that also starred Kirk Douglas and Janet Leigh, who was married to Tony Curtis at the time. Borgnine played Ragnar, the role of the forever Viking chieftain, which required physical strength and intense action. On the other hand, Curtis played Eric, the romantic and reluctant hero adopted by Ragnar and later revealed to be his son. In later years, an interview was held in 1999 to review the part of each character in the movie. It featured Borgnine saying, "Tony was a good kid, but he wasn't a warrior. He didn't believe in getting dirt under his fingernails. He was always worried about the hair, the costume, the camera angle. That's not acting to me." On the other hand, Tony made very few public comments about Borgnine, but admitted that The Vikings had been a very challenging shoot in physically demanding locations, cold weather, and very physical action sequences. It was something he had never done before. He always wanted to limit his stunt work on the set. However, as a matter of principle, Borgnine preferred doing his stunts whenever possible. This made him reportedly frustrated by what he viewed as Curtis's softness and vanity. One can hardly blame Borgnine, as it was evident that he was used to rigorous grit's discipline and a fierce passion for his craft, which he had developed both on the naval front and from years in the theater. However, Curtis preferred movies that showed his charisma, adaptability, and marketability. His was a stardom that relied on his personality rather than on preparation, and in all honesty, that worked for him. It did not eliminate the fact that he was a star regardless. Borgnine, in several biographies, including his, drew a sharp line between actors who lived the part and actors who posed the part. And while no name was directly mentioned, it is safe to assume that he was speaking about Curtis. He said, "Some actors show up to act, others show up to be seen. I like the first kind." By the 1960s, the gap between Curtis's persona and Borgnine's values had widened. This event affected their casting in movies. A prominent example was during casting discussions for The Great Race in 1965, which was supposed to be a comedy-adventure movie. The producers considered both actors for the role, with Curtis as the hero and Borgnine as a side role. However, Borgnine vehemently refused. Thereafter, other Hollywood producers and casting agents, including The Great Movie Stars by David Shipman, affirmed that Borgnine actively avoided projects where Curtis earned more, as he did not believe he had earned it. That is to say that after working together on The Vikings, they never worked together again, although they sometimes attended the same industry events until both their deaths. In a panel discussion about Tony Curtis in 2008, he responded, "He made many people happy, but he was never my kind of actor. That was exactly his type of person, honest, blunt, and unafraid of the repercussions of his words." Frank Sinatra. In 1953, the two men were placed on the set of From Here to Eternity in Hawaii to act the two major lead roles. Frank Sinatra's musical career had hit a major low then, and rumors swirled around that he got the role of Private Angelo Maggio only because of mob pressure on Columbia Pictures. However, Borgnine acted in the role of sadistic sergeant. Fatso Judson is the character who beat Maggio to death. At the time, Borgnine described himself as a starving actor in New York, resigned to trying to get a job with the post office. This movie spotlighted Frank Sinatra, as his role landed him an Oscar for his outstanding performance, giving him a wonderful re-entrance to the entertainment industry. However, it would seem that their on-screen hatred, which was displayed in the movie, was also expressed in their real-life daily interactions. True to the rules of the entertainment industry, there were no physical altercations on set. However, both in an interview with a biographer and several other instances, Borgnine made it clear that he never respected Sinatra as a serious actor and was skeptical of the alleged mafia ties that helped him land the role. The rumors of their clash began from behind-the-scenes encounters during the filmmaking period. Borgnine reportedly told a friend, "Frank was never one of us. He didn't come up through the trenches. He didn't know how to take a punch and give one back." At another time, he also said he had a dominating presence, cold attitude, and damaging influence. He also addressed him as a guy who could, with a glance, freeze a room. It is safe to say that Borgnine's major clash with Sinatra stemmed from his inherent discipline from the Navy, which he brought into acting. Remember that Sinatra was opposite Borgnine on every front and was loose with everything: women, drinks, laughs, and even cigarettes. Also, remember that he was always concerned with stardom. Now, Sinatra was a famously nocturnal individual who often partied and sang till sunrise, thus making him appear at the scene late more than once. On the other hand, Borgnine was used to morning calls to duty and could work even on a tight schedule. This character difference also impacted the production, as directors on the set spoke of the difficulty in coordinating scenes, especially whenever Sinatra came in late or unprepared for the set. This character defect irritated and infuriated Borgnine, whose mantra was, "Show up on time, know your lines, and don't act like you're bigger than the picture." This attitude marked Sinatra at the top of Borgnine's list of unserious individuals, and he showed this by refusing to join the Rat Pack social circle during the filming period. Peter J. Levinson's Sinatra, Hollywood His Way, described Borgnine as one of the few actors who didn't care who Frank knew. He was not interested in his acclaimed name or success stories or in playing in Hollywood politics. One would have thought the movie's massive success would calm the tension between both men, but that could have easily passed as a joke. Despite the whopping 8 Oscars awards it won, including in the Best Picture category, their relationship remained strained. According to reports, Borgnine was excluded from every celebratory event involving Sinatra, the Rat Pack, or any other inner circle. When Borgnine was asked about working again with Frank in the late 1970s, his response was a simple, "Once was plenty." Years later, in a 1985 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, he gave another submission on the matter. He said, "Frank always played to the camera, not to the scene. Me? I played the character." This single comment was enough to spark different interpretations of their ongoing rivalry. Questions began to fly around. Was it possible that Borgnine was jealous of Sinatra? Or was he just dissatisfied with the level of professionalism Frank ever displayed? One thing was evident. Borgnine viewed acting as a craft, while Frank viewed it as a place where one could flaunt his prowess. And it was a negative symbol of how celebrities could override hard work in the movie industry. Aside from their personality clash, they stood on opposite ends regarding America's political and cultural divide. Sinatra, at the time, was deeply rooted in Democratic politics, was friends with John F. Kennedy's son-in-law, and even was aligned with J.F. Kennedy's political activities and civil rights activism, at least until he was accused of illicit activities with the mob, which led to his ostracization. On the other hand, Borgnine was a staunch conservative and a military supporter, having served in the military himself. He was noted to have performed on several USO tours, supported Vietnam veterans, and believed in Hollywood's moral responsibility. By contrast, Borgnine was a staunch conservative and military supporter. He performed in countless USO tours, supported Vietnam veterans, and believed in Hollywood's moral responsibility. While not aligned with politics, he was totally against Frank Sinatra's use of his position in Hollywood to push political agendas, mainly when it affected casting or studio decisions. Looking back, their political and personal differences reflect something larger than individual differences. It showed the battle for Hollywood's appearance in the coming years. Should it reflect nepotism during casting or indiscipline that no one dared to stand up to? Or should charisma be celebrated over character? Or instead, could we look more towards celebrating Gritz's hard work, skills, and discipline? Shouldn't we be more focused on respecting the old chain of command, not cutting through corners? For Frank Sinatra, music was the way forward. He concentrated more on the Rat Pack and his other musicals and dubbed them at times into movies. However, he never again acted in any rigorous way as he did in From Here to Eternity. Borgnine, on the other hand, went on to feature in other movies both as a hero and as a brilliant actor, and won himself an Oscar the next year, all the while never compromising on his standards. This friction between the two was not announced and was unknown to most people. However, this wasn't scandalous, and neither would it be the last. He was just the beginning for many others later associated with Borgnine. Its origin was easily traceable to ideological differences in philosophy, politics, and professionalism. Origin of a hate list. In a rarely ever discussed interview with his biographer, Ernest Borgnine revealed a list of 7 actors he openly admitted to disliking, a revelation that shocked many due to Borgnine's usually affable public persona. At the very top of his list was Frank Sinatra, a name he didn't hesitate to mention. The tone of the interview was unfiltered and starkly honest. Borgnine was strict, factual, and unapologetically candid as he laid out his reasons for each inclusion. Alongside Sinatra, the list featured other iconic names: Tony Curtis, Montgomery Clift, Charlton Heston, George C. Scott, Anthony Quinn, and Burt Lancaster. Borgnine didn't focus on professional jealousy or competition. Rather, he zeroed in on what he described as deep-seated character defects, especially in the way these men conducted themselves within the movie industry. He believed some were arrogant, others manipulative, and a few completely detached from the everyday struggles of those around them on set. What stood out most was that Borgnine didn't generalize. He gave specific incidents or personality traits that rubbed him the wrong way. For instance, he accused some of being unnecessarily difficult to work with, others of treating crew members with contempt, and a few of caring more about fame than craft. The way he spoke left no doubt that his judgments weren't made lightly or emotionally. They were, in his view, the result of years of first-hand observation and experience in an industry where ego and ethics often collided. Who exactly is Ernest Borgnine? An introspection into the life of the actor. Son of Italian immigrants, he was born Ernest Borgnine on the 24th of January 1917 in Hamden, Connecticut. He spent 10 years in the U.S. Navy from 1935 to 1945, including during World War II. He had risen to the rank of gunner's mate first class, acquiring the right attitude and discipline to stay with him throughout his life. After his time in the Navy, he returned home with no clear career path. Borgnine recalled his mother, Anna, saying, "You like to make a damned fool of yourself in front of people. Why don't you try acting?" That one statement changed the trajectory of his course, thus making him one of the most unexpected but enduring actors of the 20th century. Thanks to his mother's advice, he began studying at the Randall School of Dramatic Art in Hartford at the mature age of 28 in the fall of 1945. From there on, he worked through stock theater and television appearances and took on supporting film roles. He began his movie career in 1951, where he played several supporting roles, but played a significant lead role in 1955, where he starred in Marty, a small, deeply personal film about a lonely Bronx butcher. This movie earned him his first Academy Award for Best Actor, an award for which he was nominated alongside then-popular actors James Dean and Spencer Tracy. At the time, the win surprised many as he wasn't too popular and did not possess the looks of a typical lead character, as he was short and stocky. He went on from here to win 20 awards during his lifetime, with an additional 10 nominations that never translated into wins. When asked in a 1990 interview for The Hollywood Reporter, he had once stated that people liked him because he was a guy who worked for a living. He went on to make headlines, collecting more awards and playing more and more lead roles. However, his military discipline, punctuality, respect, respectfulness, and bluntness stayed with him. This began to cause trouble as his intolerance for any form of unprofessionalism began to seep through. He was never afraid to speak up about situations. For instance, in his 2008 memoir, Ernie, the autobiography, he stated, "I have worked with actors who think that showing up late is a sign of star power. I have seen talent wasted on ego. That's not how I came up." Typical of any human behavior, this attitude, alongside his natural mannerisms, won him some lifelong professional friends and a few enemies. He, however, was not known for having long-term feuds with fellow acts that led to battles on gossip columns or social media platforms, even though he was active on social media in his 90s. However, through quotes during interviews, a handful of names pop up as people with whom he clashed, got frustrated, or disagreed with, and here they are. One would easily see that Borgnine was a man rarely swayed by comments, personality, or power, and had lots of discipline in his wake. This, however, did not stop him from having a lovable personality or budding relationships. Here's a list of 5 men that Ernest Borgnine hated during his lifetime. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. You could also drop topics you want us to discuss on this channel. Thank you for watching.